I, like most Americans, believe that the Second Amendment guarantees an individual the right to bear arms. I think we recognize the traditions of gun ownership that passed on from generation to generation, that hunting and shooting are part of a cherished national heritage. But I also believe that a lot of gun owners would agree that AK-47s belong in the hands of soldiers, not in the hands of criminals. That they belong on the battlefield of war, not on the streets of our cities. I believe the majority of gun owners would agree that we should do everything possible to prevent criminals and fugitives from purchasing weapons. That we should check someone's criminal record before they can check out a gun seller. That a mentally unbalanced individual should not be able to get his hands on a gun so easily. These steps shouldn't be controversial, they should be common sense. So I'm going to continue to work with members of both parties, and with religious groups, and with civic organizations, to arrive at a consensus around violence reduction.
The White House says Obama is not seeking new gun laws. Even as the issue of guns shifts to the forefront of the presidential campaign, the White House and top Democrats made it clear Thursday that the new gun legislation will not be on the political agenda this year. So, Obama pledges to review gun control after Aurora shooting, and Obama not seeking new gun laws. So, a little double speak, a little double think there. Also, you have the UN bill possibly going to be passed tomorrow. So, it may not even really matter because the UN would basically override U.S. constitutional law, which gives American citizens the right to bear arms. And it doesn't really matter what type of arms it is. I mean, if we were living in, and I hate using this analogy because I kind of like a stateless society, i.e. no government, but just for the sake of most people don't, I use this example that, you know, with the Revolutionary War, you know, back then they used what? They used muskets, which is what the British Army had. I mean, maybe they had like small artillery, like cannons or something like that, but whatever they can get to match their enemy, which is at that time their government, they needed to have that. So I mean, they're talking. They want the American people to have pitchforks while they have laser-guided missiles. I mean, come on now. And he's talking about getting arms into the criminals. Well, I think we all understand that there are laws on the books for everything. You can't, you know, sell milk in a liquor store, and all other sorts of crazy laws like permits to grow a garden in your backyard. But many of them aren't enforced. And that's the thing. They're on the books so that if they ever want to pull your card, they can, because there's laws for everything. So we're all basically criminals. And talking about putting arms in the hands of people with mental disabilities or mental illness, well, that's done all the time in the military and in the police force. But I did find it ironic that Obama used this. He's using the same playing card or the same phrase that Jason Alexander used, and I put this in my last videos. I cannot understand support for legality of the kind of weapon in this massacre. It's a military weapon. Why should it be in non-military hands? It's almost like they're reading from a playbook, you know? So my website is ggnonline.com. There's a poll up here. Do you think the mainstream media's anti-gun coverage prior to the signing of the UN arms trade treaty is coincidental? So far, a majority of people are saying no, it's not a coincidence, i.e. it's politically motivated, followed by 8% saying yes, it is just a coincidence. And I would like to thank the people that donated to me recently, and the people that are always supporting me. Not always, but they're usually the same people, and I'd like to thank you very much for doing that. Okay, so moving on to the propaganda here. The arguments that I'm seeing right now is, oh, I'm a gun owner, and I think we should ban assault weapons. Oh, I was in the military, and I think we should ban assault weapons. You'll see this right here from this coming from Time. It says, gun owners' case against assault weapons. We ban the kind of extreme firearm use in Aurora, Colorado once. It's time to do so again. So this whole shooting thing has been basically covered to death, I think. I really don't even want to cover it because everyone's covering it, but I feel compelled to wrap all these articles and stuff and stories that I've seen going out throughout the internet and that. Carrying guns everywhere won't protect us. It's time for a ban on semi-automatic weapons, says Andrew Jensen, who is in the military. That's right. And he basically goes on, he says, no, you can't stop it unless you want to keep your weapon closer. Then I kept my weapon in Iraq. So let's not ask the right questions about society. You know, were people back in the prior to the, say, the 20th century, the 21st century, were they going out into churches and movie or whatever theaters, shooting masses of people up just for the hell of it, for the fun of it? No, I don't think so. So there's something that needs to be asked about our society. It's not just mental illness here. And in fact, he was actually on drugs, just like many of these other individual shooters, quote, individual shooters. But yeah, the usual suspects are out calling for gun control. Michael Moore pleads for gun control after the Colorado theater shooting. He says, I'm sick of this. So we're sick of you too, Michael Moore. And like I said before, these are very dangerous people. Colorado consensus on gun laws. Colorado, this is from the 26th, broadly supported post-Columbine reforms to balance gun rights and gun control. And they did. And you go through there, read that. Headlines and links will be posted in YouTube's video description. Also, gun sales are up in Aurora since the tragedy. Firearms interest spikes as some seek protection. So I had a commenter mentioning that as well recently about how people he knows are out going and buying firearms. So I don't know if this is what the agenda is, to get everybody to actually start carrying weapons or to abolish them. But being that the UN bill or treaty is trying to be passed tomorrow that will override the U.S. Constitution as far as bearing arms, to possess firearms to protect yourself, I think there is some kind of motive here, the way it's all coming out. So yeah, I mean, if you ask the question, Aurora's strict gun laws didn't prevent the shooting, but what if one law-abiding person did have a gun in that theater? Well, in a church, an armed churchgoer stops rampage shooting in Aurora, Colorado, April 2012. He happened to be an off-duty police officer, but it could have been any person. It says here, this UN arms treaty is full of holes, says the activist. More holes than a leaky bucket. And when you go in there, it actually says they want to confiscate and destroy all unauthorized civilian firearms, exempting those owned by our own government, of course. So this is why Obama is talking about the semi-automatic weapons. Ban the trade, sale, and private ownership of semi-automatic weapons. And you know, it's pretty crazy because the weapon actually jammed. Colorado shooter's rifle jammed during the rampage. So I doubt he was even the shooter. But even so, you know, his rifle didn't even work. So let's go ahead and let's ban all those. So yes, it is full of holes, and UN agreement should have all gun owners up in arms. It says here that one of the first principles, the inherent rights of all states to individual or collective self-defense. We're talking about individual states for collective self-defense, not individuals. And that thing, you go through there and read that, it's, like I said, some pretty dangerous stuff what they're talking about. James Holmes bought rifle after failing oral exam at University of Colorado. So, you know, here we go. Remember last time I was like surprised that they were calling him brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. But now here it comes, right? Holmes brilliant? More like adult sources say, but he was a skilled shooter, say police. What a load of shit, isn't it? Did James Holmes have a doctor? Let's go to the doctor, because that's where the drugs are. So today is the 26th. This article is from the 22nd. And the author writes, let's see if James Holmes had a doctor, possibly a psychiatrist. And let's have a list of the drugs he was prescribed. Let's go all the way back to the first appointment, perhaps when he was a child. He said, wouldn't this be relevant evidence? And it goes on there, it says, I can't tell you that right now. Somebody in law enforcement knows whether Holmes ever had psychiatric treatment. If you were Holmes' psychiatrist right now, sitting in your house having a drink, says here, going over your treatment and the drugs you gave him, wouldn't you want the greatest degree of anonymity possible? Wouldn't you want to protect the American Psychiatric Association, the companies who make the drugs that drive people crazy? Well, he did have a psychiatrist, and in fact, he wrote him. He sent the massacre plans to a psychiatrist, says a report. Apparently sat unopened in a mailroom until after the killing, says Fox. Now this is interesting because he could have been his handler, right? This psychiatrist, kind of like Virginia Tech and stuff like that. And he was on pharmaceutical drugs. That's right. Follow the trend. Batman shooter James Holmes was on hardcore pharmaceutical drugs. It says here it was a fix for altering his state of mind. He says that he was heavily hooked on the prescription painkiller Vicodin. So the side effects of Vicodin include altered mental states and unusual thoughts or behavior, and they're even deadlier and more damaging than many illegal drugs. So yeah, this they're saying that it's the same drug that killed Heath Ledger, supposedly, right? Again, that's this is a rabbit hole that just keeps going deeper and deeper. So that's why eventually I'm just going to stop covering it, because there's so many angles to this story. Holmes' family tied to DARPA and mind manipulation work. And it goes on there, says there are several links between James Holmes and the U.S. government research Salk Institute involved in neurologically enhancing soldiers' abilities on the battlefield and connections to DARPA. So it goes on here and it says, so Holmes is one of 6 recipients of the National Institutes of Health Neuroscience Training Grant at the University of Colorado Medical Campus in Denver. He was a graduate University of California at Riverside with a bachelor's in neuroscience. Although he dropped out of the neuroscience program, PhD program in June, police evacuated 2 buildings at the center after the massacre at the Aurora movie theater. Holmes reportedly gave a presentation at the campus in May. So yeah, it's interesting because it says here this Holmes' past association with government research projects prompted police and federal law enforcement officials to order laboratories and schools with which Holmes has had a past association not to talk to the press about Holmes. And apparently this medical campus was a recently decommissioned site of the U.S. Army Medical Center. So in 2006, at the age of 18, Holmes served as a research intern at the Salk Institute at the University of California in San Diego. But the author, I believe is Wayne Matson, says it's noteworthy that for the previous 2 years before Holmes worked at the Salk Institute, the research center was partnered with DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, Columbia University, and a whole slew of them, including the Mars Company, the manufacturer of Milky Way and Snickers bars, to prevent fatigue and combat troops through the enhanced use of this chemical, a blood-flowing and blood vessel dilating antioxidant flavanol found in cocoa and particularly dark chocolate.
Bath salts. Now, bath salts is a street name for a whole class of so-called designer drugs. They're not actually bath salts. Bath salts are perfectly safe. It turns out these designer drugs, if you inject them, they can, of course, be extremely toxic. But here's the thing that they don't tell you. The active chemical in this specific designer drug is really the same as the chemical that's found in things like chocolate. But when you eat chocolate, it goes through digestion, and there are inhibitors of that chemical that prevent it from taking over your brain. But this designer street drug was specifically formulated with not only a high concentration of that chemical, but also with inhibitors to make sure that the drug wouldn't be broken down so it could be delivered right into your brain with very high concentrations. And then, oh, that makes you go crazy.
Apparently this cannibal wasn't high on bath salts, he was high on cannabis. So there was a little bit of a cover-up there as well, I think. So this research was part of a larger DARPA program known as the Peak Soldier Performance Program, which involved creating brain-machine interfaces for battlefield use, including human robotic bionics for legs, in other words, the neuroprosthetic limbs for soldiers paralyzed in combat. And remember, I covered before, his father actually wrote some research for the U.S. Navy, and also he worked for this company, HNC Software, known as a neural network company in DARPA beginning in 1998, developing Cortronic neural networks. So it's basically to allow machines to be able to think like humans. The writers begs the question, the links between the younger and elder Holmes and U.S. government research on creating super soldiers, human brain-machine interfaces, and human-like robots begs the question, was James Holmes engaged in a real-life Jason Bourne Treadstone project that broke down and resulted in a deadly consequence in Aurora, Colorado? Links will be posted in video in the YouTube's video description, so check it out. James Holmes' mentor admits to mind manipulation. He mentioned in his science camp presentation about temporal illusions and subjective experience. But now John Jacobson, the mentor, now completely denies being Holmes' mentor. Check this out as well, from bench to bunker, how a 1960s discovery in neuroscience spawned a military project. They're talking about, again, DARPA. Combine psychology and neuroscience to understand what types of communication best convince those living in occupied lands that they should yield to American forces. The project also aimed at developing drugs that would reduce or erase traumatic memories. Was this project taken from a Batman comic with Sherlock Holmes or the elongated man? Either way, it makes for a good riddle.